Climate change is the global phenomenon climate transformation characterized by the changes in the usual climate of the planet that is commonly influenced by the greenhouse gases. This video will be explaining the potential effects of climate change, specifically in Australia, which the data is a summarization from the IPCC reports, or known as the Intergovernmental Panel Climate Change, and from the National Communication Reports under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change.
According to National Geographic, global warming is the phenomenon of increasing average air temperature near the surface of Earth over the past 1 to 2 centuries. In Australia, the average rise is a little over 1.4 degrees Celsius. However, because of human activities, the rise of temperature in Australia has become higher than it's supposed to be. So how does global warming affect Australia? The rise in temperature creates drier conditions, and this increases the likelihood and intensity of wildfire and megafire. In 2019, fire burned across most of Australia, and for the first time in the history, the wet forests that usually suppress fire were burned permanently. In Southeast Australia, the frequency of very high and extreme fire danger days is likely to rise from 15% to 70% by 2050. As climate change progresses, it makes drought conditions worse in Australia. Climate models for Australia predict there will be less rainfall over the southern Australia under climate change. The research from Bureau of Meteorology show that precipitation could be reduced by 50% in the winter over southwestern Australia by 2090. As the world warms, seemingly small increases in global temperature change the frequency, intensity, spread, duration, timing of the weather, and climate extreme. Australia heat waves are already so severe that they can melt roads and turn vegetation black. Considering the impacts of climate change globally, the United Nations of Environment Program has stated that these record temperature, droughts, and heat waves are not anomalous, but they are the beginning of a new norm.
The current global climate change prediction, sea levels will rise anywhere between 45 and 82 cm by 2090. With 80% of Australia's population living along the coast, this will have a huge impact on coastal infrastructure, community livelihoods, agriculture, and habitability. The first potential effects of climate change on sea levels is flood risk. Flooding induced by Tropical Cyclone Wanda in 1974 was studied using a high-resolution atmospheric model of storm events combined with nonlinear flood event model. If the same incident occurred in 2050 with a rise in mean sea level of 10 to cm, the number of impacted dwellings and individuals worldwide increased by 3 to 18%. Saltwater intrusion also has a potential effect on sea level. As a result of rising sea levels, it will reduce river flows, and also more frequent droughts are expected to change the species composition of freshwater ecosystems, have extinct estuarine and coastal fisheries. Ocean acidification is predicted to reduce the productivity and variety of plankton population in Australian marine ecosystem, whereas warmer temperatures are likely to cause fish and crab species to migrate southward. By 2050, a 0.2 meter increase in sea level combined with 50-year storm event causes coastalization more than 100 at Collaroy, Narrabeen Beach, resulting in the damage of $184 million. According to Sharkus, in 2014, in the next 50 to 100 years, the Tasmanian shoreline faces erosion and substantialization as a result of expected sea level rise.
A changing climate means changing habitats, strengthening of vulnerable species. On a continent like Australia, where temperatures are already high, such a rise might have significant ecological consequences. As the climate hits, the geographic positions of climatic envelopes will move dramatically, potentially to the point where species may no longer be able to survive in the current areas. The flora and fauna of Australia have a high degree of endemism. Most species are well adapted to short-term climate variability, but not to longer term shift. Climate change is affecting the habitats of several species as well as the species itself. To survive, these species will need to adapt or migrate to areas with more favorable conditions. But it is not always possible to migrate. There might be geographical or human-made barrier or competitions from species already in an area. There is evidence that some species are physiologically vulnerable to temperature spikes. For example, the green-winged possum, an endemic species of Queensland's tropical rainforest. It cannot control its body temperatures when the ambient temperature rises above 13 degrees Celsius. An extended heatwave in North Queensland could kill off a large part of its populations. And in 2011, a heatwave that lasted 100 kilometers along the coast of Western Australia wiped out kelp forests. The temperate fish, seaweed, and invertebrate communities that once thrived alongside the kelp vanished with it. And tropical and tropical reef communities now dominate the ecosystem.
In conclusion, global warming, sea level rises, and the threat to biodiversity are the most visible potential effects on climate change in Australia. However, if the community works together to curb these issues efficiently and effectively, the chances for us, the human being, to save the Earth's future is high and might as well sustain life on Earth. There are two responses to climate change that involve a two-tier approach, which is mitigation, that reduces the greenhouse gases, and adaptation, that learns to live with the climate, because what we save saves us.